The hidden cost of being too visible. Visibility feels powerful at first. Attention creates relevance. Recognition creates leverage. But visibility always comes with a price. And that price compounds faster than most expect. In the early stages of influence, being seen is an advantage. It attracts allies. It deters challengers. It signals arrival. Yet among the most powerful sheiks, visibility is treated cautiously, not as a reward, but as a liability to be managed. To understand why this matters today, we need to separate attention from control. Attention feels like power, but it behaves more like exposure. Every appearance creates expectations. Every statement fixes a position. Every image limits future movement. The more visible you become, the fewer options remain unseen. At first, visibility accelerates growth. Influence spreads quickly. Narratives form favorably. Momentum builds. But momentum attracts scrutiny. Questions multiply. Motives are dissected. Actions are framed by others. And once interpretation replaces intention, control begins to slip. The sheiks observe this pattern repeatedly. They watch leaders rise on visibility, only to lose leverage as attention hardened into demand. Being seen invited negotiation. Being known invited pressure. Being recognizable invited interference. Visibility narrowed the field of possible moves. What once felt expansive became constraining. This is where the hidden cost appears. Every visible action becomes precedent. Every precedent becomes obligation. And every obligation reduces autonomy. The world begins to expect consistency. Consistency becomes predictability. Predictability becomes vulnerability. This is why elite power limits exposure intentionally, not to disappear, but to preserve optionality. They understood something counterintuitive. Influence grows strongest when it is not fully observed. When visibility is controlled, movement remains flexible. When attention is rationed, decisions retain surprise. This is the opening tension, because modern systems reward exposure aggressively. Algorithms amplify it. Institutions demand it. Audiences expect it. Refusing visibility looks suspicious. Avoiding attention looks defensive. And yet, those who resist visibility often retain the most control. This creates a paradox. The more visible power becomes, the more fragile it is, and the less visible it becomes, the more durable it often grows. That paradox sets the stage for what comes next, because once visibility becomes unavoidable, power must learn how to survive it without being consumed by it. As visibility increases, it begins to change behavior in ways that are difficult to reverse, because once attention locks onto a person, an institution, or a center of power, every future action is interpreted through a fixed narrative that no longer belongs to the original actor. What was once a strategic move becomes a public expectation. What was once optional becomes required. And what was once flexible becomes rigid under constant observation. The sheiks learned that visibility does not simply reveal power. It shapes it, compresses it, and slowly hardens it into a form that is easier for others to predict, challenge, and eventually contain. With every appearance, context is lost. With every statement, ambiguity disappears. And with every explanation, leverage leaks away. At scale, visibility creates a dangerous illusion of transparency. Observers believe they understand intentions. Analysts believe they can forecast decisions. Opponents believe they can prepare responses in advance. This is where power quietly weakens. When the world thinks it understands you, it stops fearing uncertainty. And fear is often what preserves balance. The sheiks noticed that the most visible actors were forced into constant clarification. Every silence demanded explanation. Every delay invited speculation. Every deviation triggered suspicion. Visibility transformed freedom into obligation. The need to maintain narrative coherence became more restrictive than any external rule. Consistency replaced creativity. Predictability replaced surprise. And slowly, almost invisibly, control migrated outward. Others began defining meaning. Others framed motives. Others decided what actions represented. This is the unseen transfer of power. Visibility also creates permanence. Mistakes do not fade. Experiments cannot be undone. Context collapses into headlines. The sheiks understood that exposure turns time against you. Past decisions become anchors. Old statements become constraints. Growth becomes betrayal of expectation. This is why elite power treats visibility as a finite resource, not something to be maximized, but something to be rationed carefully. They learn that power survives longest when it can still surprise, still reposition, still arrive from an unexpected angle. But managing visibility is not the same as avoiding it. Total absence invites speculation. Complete silence creates instability. The challenge was never disappearance. It was control, and that control would soon be tested. As visibility became impossible to escape in a world designed to extract attention relentlessly, the real conflict begins when visibility stops being a choice and becomes an environment. Because once attention surrounds power continuously, even restraint is interpreted as strategy, and even silence is framed as intent. At this stage, visibility no longer observes behavior. It shapes it. Every decision is made with an audience in mind, not because power wants approval, but because consequences now arrive faster than reflection. The sheiks recognize this as a dangerous threshold. When power is watched constantly, it is tempted to optimize for reaction instead of outcome. Short-term signaling replaces long-term positioning. Clarity replaces flexibility, and momentum replaces direction. Visibility begins demanding performance. Statements are issued not because action is ready, but because silence feels risky. Movement accelerates not because timing is right, but because delay invites interpretation. This is how visibility compresses strategy. The world stops waiting. Markets expect immediacy. Audiences expect response. Institutions expect alignment. And alignment narrows options. The sheiks observed how leaders trapped in visibility slowly surrendered initiative. They reacted instead of acting. They explained instead of shaping. They defended instead of designing. The cost was subtle but irreversible. Once power becomes reactive, it loses its ability to surprise. Once surprise disappears, resistance organizes faster. And once resistance organizes, control becomes expensive. This pressure created an illusion of participation. Power appeared engaged, accessible, responsive, but engagement diluted authority. Because the more visible power became, the more it was pulled into external timelines, external narratives, and external priorities. Visibility did not expose power, it synchronized it. And synchronization is vulnerability. When everyone knows when you must act, they decide when to apply pressure. When everyone knows how you speak, they decide how to provoke response. The sheiks understood that visibility was no longer about being seen. It was about being timed. That realization forced a recalibration. They could not eliminate visibility, but they could distort it. Instead of constant presence, they introduced irregular appearance. Instead of predictable messaging, they embraced selective ambiguity. This broke synchronization. Observers could see activity, but could not align against it. Attention remained, but leverage dissolved. This was not withdrawal. It was misalignment by design, and that misalignment restored space. Space to decide without countdowns. Space to act without anticipation. Space to remain powerful, without being consumed by observation. But this solution carried risk, because once visibility becomes inconsistent, it can be misread as instability, and that misunderstanding would push the conflict into its final phase, where power would have to choose between explaining itself or letting confusion do the work. The climax arrives not when visibility disappears, but when it loses its grip. Power does not defeat attention by hiding from it. It defeats attention by making it ineffective. The sheiks reached this realization when they understood that the problem was never being seen, but being interpreted on someone else's timetable, within someone else's narrative, and under someone else's expectations. So visibility was allowed to remain, but it was stripped of influence. Appearances continued, but they no longer explained direction. Statements were made, but they revealed nothing actionable. Movement was visible, but outcomes were no longer predictable. This was a turning point. Attention still existed. Scrutiny intensified, But leverage quietly vanished. Observers could watch everything and still understand nothing, because visibility without clarity creates paralysis, not control. This is the highest form of adaptation. Power stopped reacting to attention and started letting attention exhaust itself. Narratives formed too early and collapsed too fast. Speculation replaced certainty. Certainty was never reached. And without certainty, pressure loses force. This resolved the paradox. Power no longer needed to disappear to stay effective. It only needed to decouple visibility from consequence. The world could look, but it could not time, predict, or corner outcomes. That was the revelation. Visibility is dangerous only when it dictates behavior. Once behavior is insulated, visibility becomes harmless noise. The resolution is clear. The most durable power today is not the power that avoids attention, nor the power that dominates it. It is the power that survives attention without changing course. Because when being watched no longer matters, watching loses its purpose. And once that happens, power is free again. Free to move quietly, free to decide privately, and free to act without needing to explain itself. That is the hidden cost of visibility reversed. And that is why those who appear most exposed are often the least constrained. The hidden